Hello, you're watching PC Jack. Today, we're going to take a look at how to overclock the RX 6650 XT. It's a pretty straightforward process, but I'm going to show you the settings that I like to use when I'm running through an overclock, and more specifically, how to do it within the Radeon software. So we're going to use Adrenaline for today's overclocking, so all we need to do is go to Performance, and then we're going to go to Tuning. So this is where we're going to do our overclocking within the Radeon software. And all we're going to want to start out with is basically enabling all the settings that we need to use in order to do the overclock. So we're going to go to Custom, Accept, and we're going to enable. We want to have as much control as possible. So the first thing that I would always start out doing when I do any sort of overclocking is going to be increasing our power limit. And you simply do this by grabbing this dial over here and maxing it out. Now, all this will do is not actually increase the amount of power that the card is drawing, but it will allow it to draw more if necessary. And for myself, I can max out this dial and only draw a couple more watts, so it's nothing crazy to worry about. Next, we're going to focus on our frequencies over here on the left. Now, it's best practice to try and keep the minimum frequency and the maximum frequency within 100 megahertz of each other, as this can make things a lot more stable as you're doing your overclock. So you can start out pretty straightforward. If you want to just bump it up about 10 megahertz at a time, just test it. So we go 27.75, and then for the minimum frequency we would go 26.75. And then what you can do then is you can run a benchmark to see whether that is stable or not. And if it is, great, and then we can start working on bumping that even more. But each time you bump it up, you are going to want to ensure that it is within 100 megahertz of each other, and also ensure that it's stable each time you increase it. So in my case, I know that I can overclock my Red Devil RX 6650 XT to 3000, so I can increase the maximum frequency to 3000, and I'll change the minimum to 29. Now, the one thing to bear in mind is when you increase these frequencies, they are going to vary a little bit when you're actually in game, and they do tend to be about 50 or so megahertz below what you set. So even though I'm setting 3000 megahertz, I'm probably only going to be hitting around 2950 megahertz. So overall, this overclock is to around 2950 megahertz on the core clock only. But if you reach this setting and you're finding that you are stable, then you can leave that as it is and move on to the next part of our overclocking. Now, for voltage, ideally you want to try and reduce this if possible, and in my instance I haven't really had time to work on lower voltage for mine, but considering the temperatures were barely peaking over 60°C with this overclock, I haven't been too fussed on reducing that. You can tweak this a little more, and you probably can bring it down a slight bit, but for now though, we're going to leave it as it is for overclocking today. So next up, we're going to move on to our memory overclock, and for here now we have the option of going from default to fast timing for our memory timing. So we're just going to change that to fast timing because we want to try and get the most of our memory as possible. And the same goes for increasing the frequency on your memory, so you can go up about 10 megahertz at a time, test, and if you're stable, keep increasing it until you reach instability. So you can start out, you go for 2198, and then test that, make sure that is stable, and then if it is, move up even higher. Now for me, I know that I can overclock my card to 2300 megahertz on the memory, so I'm just going to dial that in there. And that is actually stable for me, and it can actually increase performance pretty well with a decent memory overclock. Some people may have better luck increasing this on their own cards, but for me, this is about as far as I can push mine. And of course, any of these overclocks that you do have to ensure that you are applying changes. So you just select Apply Changes, and that has actually applied the overclock. That is basically my overclock for the RX 6650 XT. It's a pretty basic overclock, but it is pretty decent and can increase performance by about 8%. So it is still worthwhile if you want to try and get as much performance out of your card. So that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, then please feel free to like and subscribe for more videos on the way soon. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at PCJack94. If you'd like to talk more with myself and other like-minded hardware enthusiasts, then make sure to check out the PC Jack Discord. You'll find links to all those in the video description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.